Imagine if you were walking here on the beach and you were told to walk about a mile and to leave only one footprint. That's probably not something you'd be able to do. There'd be a trail of your steps all the way from where you started until the point where you ended your walk. But these footprints would not be permanent because the shore will come in at some point in time and will wash those prints away. Of course, depending on how far in you're walking. But how about if you're walking in a forested area and you're told to do the same thing, to walk for a mile and to leave only one footprint or two, let's say 2 footprints. How are you going to be able to do that? How would that happen? And is that possible? Under what circumstance would you have only one footprint in the middle of an area, for example, like this, or only one footprint in an area like this or this? You can see the reality is here we have a photo of the actual terrain for the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan. This is the real location where they live. The area is forested, covered in trees, and there's tons of bushes. And we're told in that area in Nova Scotia, yes, there is a lot of water, waterways, streams, rivers, ponds, lakes. It is surrounded by water, and we know that there are marshes in the area. So that makes it very interesting, something to focus on. When we find out that there was only one boot print in a specific location, but altogether I believe they found 2 boot prints. Because how does a person walk so far with 2 feet on each of them? In this case, we have 2 children, that's 4 feet, and they only leave 1 boot print. If you're trekking through the woods for real, there's going to be more than 1 boot print. Unless they were levitating the rest of the way and decided to put a foot down to touch the ground only at that spot, and then after that, boot print, once again, they were levitated off the ground again, and for that reason there's no prints. I just can't buy the whole boot print thing. If they made 1 boot print, then there would have been more than one, a lot more than just 1 boot print. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. That is a big red flag, and I suppose many of you also believe that the footprint was planted in a way to make the story look real. It is more so of a red herring to point things in a certain direction, to back up a story that's being told, to make it look like the kids walked away, but it just isn't adding up. Another thing that is very suspicious is the whole story of the pink blanket. It was found way up high in a tree, and whoever put it there wasn't very bright. Obviously, someone threw that blanket up there, up high in the tree, so that it would be seen, but they weren't smart enough to realize at that time when they planted it that it doesn't make sense to have the blanket so high up from ground level. The blanket was very high in that tree. And the reason why it happened like this is because it was a bit of a frenzy that day. And they were in a rush to plant the blanket without being seen. They had to do it quickly. So without thinking clearly, they just threw the blanket up in the tree and they split the scene as fast as possible. Now, Lily and Jack couldn't have put the blanket up so high in the tree. Being only 4 and 6 years old, they're very, very short. They're tiny kids. So it wasn't Lily and Jack who put that blanket up there. Now, do any of you recall how high the blanket was? Daniel himself commented on it. I believe it was maybe 10 feet up or so, if I remember correctly from what Daniel said. Now, leave me a comment if you recall the exact height, or if you recall what Daniel said about the blanket, the height of that blanket. Now, recently it has come out that Daniel was questioned again, interrogated or interviewed, whatever you want to call it, and it was recorded. He told this to one of the podcasters, the Drunk Turkey Show, which they've formed a friendship over this case. Anyhow, this interrogation happened, I believe, last week, towards the end of October of 2025. Now, we are actually October 30th today, and so I believe this happened either last Thursday or Friday, according to the DT show. So it was a recorded conversation where they wanted to talk to Daniel about what he saw that morning with regards to the pink blanket. What Daniel said was that they wanted to eliminate him as the person that planted the pink blanket out in the woods. Now, earlier on, he said they had told him it was planted, but in this interrogation, they didn't mention if it was or wasn't, and he didn't ask. So that is pretty interesting that they are bringing Daniel in once again for another interview or interrogation, whatever you want to call it, and it's being recorded specifically to clarify what Daniel has to say about the blanket. It would be logical for them to also do the same with Malaya. I have to wonder what Malaya would have to say about that blanket. Now, I'm guessing that the pink blanket would have Daniel's DNA on it, regardless of who put the blanket out in the woods on that tree, up high in that tree, and that of course Malaya's DNA would be on it as well, is my guess. That blanket was in the home, and of course the home would be full of Malaya's DNA, the kids' DNA, Daniel's DNA, and I'm sure there would be tons of other DNA as well of possibly people who were in the home or that had touched that blanket. So it's no surprise. Versus, let's say if they don't find any DNA of his on the blanket, that would be surprising. And that would bring us to some different possibilities. If Daniel's DNA is absent from that blanket, and I'm guessing it's not, but if it were, then that would open up a whole other line of possibilities. And then I would wonder, why would they question him if his DNA wasn't on it? Most likely they're going to find Malaya's DNA and Daniel's as well. But regardless, it will be interesting to find out what they found on that blanket. Now, as far as Daniel and his electronic data, he says that he was very forthcoming, very helpful with the police, that he gave them everything. They didn't have to request a search warrant. He didn't force them to do that. He was just forthcoming and gave them everything, and that's fine. But the thing about the data, all of the data that's being pulled off of the phones, for example, maybe a tablet, computer, all of that digital information is facts. It's factual. It's a trail which has to be looked at very clearly, and it is going to give, let's say, a template where you can place pieces of this puzzle, of this mystery, upon that digital template. But the thing is, as far as the phones, the reality is it just doesn't matter if your phone shows that it was at home. That doesn't prove that you're there with the phone. We know that, especially these days. We see so many cases where criminals are using their phone in a way to deceive. They know they've got to intertwine that phone data in a way to make themselves look innocent. And we see times when a criminal will have the phone of a victim afterwards, and they will, let's say, send text messages showing that, trying to show or to prove that the person is still alive, but the fact is that they're not. Later they'll find that the phone of the victim and the criminal were together within, let's say, 1 foot, and that the texting was happening back and forth between the two phones. There's so many possibilities with the phones. And like I was saying, it doesn't prove that the person is with the phone. The phone can be helpful. It is helpful if it shows movement either within the home and on the property, or if it's out on the road, but that doesn't prove who's moving the phone. It's just another piece of the puzzle that is going to help when forming the big picture of the case. And I think in this day and age, what criminal is going to bring their phone with them unless they forgot that they had it? Unless you are in such a big rush, you've got that phone in your pocket and, you're off and about trying to conceal information, trying to plant stuff or whatever, trying to move remains. If that phone is in your pocket, or for example, if that phone had been left in your vehicle and you didn't have time to even think of it, and so that would be helpful for the detectives seeing a trail of where that phone was moving. But if they find that these people's phone was at the home and that it didn't move, it doesn't prove Daniel or Malaya were there. It just doesn't. And even if that phone had moved in the home, let's say, for example, a husband is out without his phone and it doesn't move for a long time, but then let's say the wife picks it up while he's away and she's moving that phone, she opens it up, she takes it, she puts it in the kitchen, or she moves it onto his nightstand beside the bed, whatever, or she picks it up and plugs it in to charge it, or even let's say she picks it up to remove the charging cord because she needs to charge her own phone, and so for that reason the phone is picked up and moved. So that phone would have moved, but it doesn't prove the owner of the phone is with the phone. Another thing that's going to be very helpful is the text messages that they find on the phone. And we see some pretty crazy stuff in other cases where criminals will actually take some really insane photos. We saw in the recent case with Jennifer Soto and Stephen Stearns that Stephen had some insane stuff on his phone. Photos, videos, all of that stuff. It was all criminal evidence of what he'd been doing. And you'd think nobody would be that crazy to have stuff like that on their phone. But yes, this man had all of that evidence on his phone. And so who knows what might be found when that information is looked at very closely, when they sift through it. Sometimes we see that there is hidden information. For example, in the Chris Watts case, he had an app on his phone that looked like a calculator. And when he put a password into that calculator app, he was able to actually use that app not as a calculator, but as a way of sending messages and receiving stuff from Nicole Kessinger, photos, whatever it might be, so that on the outside it looked pretty innocent. If by chance Shanann had gone to his phone to look at it, it looked like a calculator, and it probably functioned as a calculator when you clicked on it, but once you entered the correct password, it would open up as a whole other thing. That's an example of how sophisticated these conniving things can become. Hidden features, hiding the things that the criminal doesn't want seen. So I'm sure without a doubt, they are working very hard behind the scenes to solve this case, to find out the most important thing, which is, where are Lily and Jack? I know some people are questioning whether or not the RCMP are doing a good job for this case, but there is something different about this case versus all of the other cases that we've seen recently. For example, Summer Wells, Sebastian Rogers, so many other cases that are out from the US. There's tons and tons of cases that we've seen in the US. Also, the Orner Orson West case, though, that one was solved, luckily. But what I'm saying is that this case is a bit different because it's not often that you see two little kids, 4 and 6 years old, go missing in Canada. It's a pretty big thing to happen there. And for that reason, it has gotten a ton of attention. We've got everyone from the US, Canada, there's people from across the world who are following this case. And it's brought a huge spotlight onto it. And that's a good thing. But also, it's a case that they're going to want to solve. It's not every day. They just don't have that many cases of two little kids going missing. Most of the time, when a little kid goes missing, they usually find them, let's say in a day or two. And for that reason, it wouldn't have exploded like this one did. But they are putting a lot of attention on this case, and they're going to bring in all the experts in order to solve it. I really hope so, because we don't want to see this end up like a lot of the other cases that remain unsolved until this day. At this point, we really don't have too much to go off of until they do come out with some digital coordinates or some factual sightings of the characters in this case, which can be verified by the detectives. It's pretty much just a huge canvas, a wide open canvas that we have here. Just have a look at this area. I did notice that with similar cases, it can be a completely different situation because this setting here is very remote. You're not going to find many doorbell cameras or home security footage. This is a rural location. Most of all, you see trees. Many of us followed the case of Sebastian Rogers, and in that one we saw a neighborhood with many security cameras. Many security cameras. The houses were very close together. Well, not very close together. It was a very nice neighborhood, but it's different from this case. The houses are closer together, and there isn't all of the trees all over the place. But even though many of those homes had security cameras, there was no footage of Sebastian that showed him leaving the house. So even when there are cameras, it's not perfect. But we know somehow Sebastian did leave that house. I don't know if he left on his own. I don't know if he was taken out. But yes, somehow he left that house, and there is no security footage to show it. Now back to Lily and Jack's disappearance. Or maybe I should say back to the two missing kids from Nova Scotia. As some people, I noticed, don't like to use the word disappear because they actually didn't disappear. I get that. It doesn't really bother me either way. It's almost as if they did just poof up and vanish into the air. And for that reason, we do call it a disappearance, and that is widely used. But yes, this is a case of 2 missing kids. Anyhow, there are a few other oddities that I wanted to talk about, other possibilities. One thing I had noticed a while back was the area around their home. I've been looking for good clear photos, but the best I could find were these ones here. I had a thought a few days back after looking at this photo here. It just kind of up and popped up into my mind. If you look here at this area, right here, it looks like it could be water and a bit swampy. And there are many areas there on the land with water waist deep. As we heard from Daniel, he said he had to go through some pretty rough areas where he was soaked and the water had reached his waist level. And Daniel had mentioned specifically this area very close to their home, which is the area they call the Marsh. Daniel parked right here, right by the marsh. When he got home that morning, he said the police were already there, and for some reason, I'm not really sure why, but he decided to park right there, right by the marsh, versus parking closer up to the home. And it kind of makes me think, like right away I'm thinking, does he have something that he doesn't want them to see in his vehicle? Is there something he needs more time to hide? Something that he's not sure about, so he wants to have that car parked. I think it was maybe 100 feet or maybe 200 feet away from the house. It's pretty far, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyhow, the point is that we have the area right there. It's a marshy area, and we know that there is a lot of water throughout that whole area. So we know now the story as they've told us. Pretty much the story is from Janie, from Malaya, and from Daniel. It's that Lily and Jack were up that morning, that they were there. As far as Janie, she says that she did hear them and then she didn't hear them. And so I'm just thinking, being a mother, I know how it is when kids are that age. Once they start walking, it's not easy to keep up with them. And you really have to keep your eyes on them. They're very curious. And after a while of walking, they really pick up speed. I'm sure many of you remember those years, and some of you might have little ones right now. So you're getting your exercise as we speak, having to keep up with them, make sure they don't get in trouble. That's the way it is. But with Lily and Jack being 4 and 6, these two probably had a great time exploring around that property, around their home. But the thought that came to me was that this area here, just seeing this made me think those bushy treed areas are probably concealing some wet, swampy areas. I don't know exactly where, but spots that you'd want to avoid for sure. But depending on how adventurous Lily and Jack were, I have to wonder how far they would get. But this spot here, if it's 4 or 5 feet deep, for example, it could be a big danger for little kids. Let me know what you think. Now we know even having a pool in the yard is dangerous. Telling the kids to avoid a pool is just not enough, and I think it's the same thing here. Telling them to avoid that water is not enough of a safety measure. You've got to put a safety fence up. Anyhow, I thought, what if they'd wandered away and ended up in that water, in the marsh? We know they're all saying basically the same thing, that they were dozing off or they'd been sleeping in. I'm thinking that will give an excuse for why they couldn't have made it there in time to pull the kids out safely from that marsh. And I'm just thinking, if I lived in that area, that would be one of my main concerns. Seeing that land, having a marsh right beside you, you've got to know that's dangerous. And it's not good for little kids. You really have to watch them carefully. So let me know what you think. Not only that, but the place is surrounded with wildlife. We did hear they do have bears that come out at night on the driveway, by the garbage, whatever it might be. That place is surrounded. So that was my thought. I don't know if there's any truth to it. It was just kind of a thing that just popped up in my mind. But I was thinking, wow, that is something that really could happen. Kids do get adventurous. These kids are very adventurous. They have the fort there in the woods, and they're obviously not afraid, but the marsh area is kind of like where the grass grows right into it, I guess, and they might have stepped into it. Possibly, the way I see this, I imagine that maybe Jack was the one who had gone in that marsh area, and then he probably called out to Lily, who was very close by, and she would have tried to help him. She does have a very loud scream. I don't know if she would have just reached out to him, and then both of them very quickly would have lost control because of that marsh area. And I'm sure it's very sticky there. It's mud and water and everything. So there was another case that I'd been following out of the UK with a woman who had gone for a walk, more of a park area, but there was a river as well, a stream, quite a large river, and the Nicola Bully case, and somehow she fell into the water, and she wasn't able to pull herself back out onto the muddy side of the river. So you see that even an adult can have a hard time when there's a lot of muck and stuff like that, and when your clothing gets full of water, that gets heavy as well, and they lose control very quickly. It's really scary, but I see that there's a lot of emotion from Daniel when he talks about the water waist deep. He almost breaks out crying, and I guess he feels like there was no one there to help him. Maybe he had to pull them out from the water. Maybe he found them and it was an accident and he had to pull them out from the water, and then I just don't get why they didn't report it, you know? So if it had been an accident, then the thing to do would be to call for like help, you know, call for an ambulance, whatever it might be, to get them resuscitated. But then we don't know how long it had been. We don't know, like, this is just my own idea, you know? We don't know exactly what else was going on, but the thing that really gets me kind of in connection with this possibility, there was the issue of CPS, which at this point we don't know what it was. We don't know why CPS was involved, but maybe they were kind of like neglected. Maybe the kids appeared to be neglected or something like that. Maybe there were some odd signs, and maybe that's why there was involvement from the CPS. Maybe the kids weren't being watched closely enough, and maybe they just snuck off and everyone had slept in that morning, you know? So who knows? Who knows what's going on here? That is my thought. Let me know what your own opinions are. I'm thinking it's either an accident. Otherwise, it might be something a lot more dark. We still have that theory where possibly Malaya would have gotten the kids, put them into a car and sent them off. But Lily and Jack were Malaya's kids, you know, so why would she have to sneak them off away from Daniel? You know, they are her own children. So I really don't see why she would have to do that. But I hope that it's something like that, because in that case, the kids are safe right now. Someone has them safe. They're hidden away. And I just don't know if she's behaving like kind of together with that possibility. Does it make sense the way she's behaving, that it would be that? Or does her behavior point towards something totally different? So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you all think. Leave me your comments down below, and please remember to subscribe, turn on your notifications so that I don't miss you next time, and please have a look at my Patreon. It's free to join. It's another way to stay connected, and I'll be putting up more content on my Patreon where we can discuss things more informally and discuss things that we're not really going to talk about here on YouTube as much. Anyhow, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I will do my best to read all of your comments. Let me know which cases you're most interested in. You can contact me with the details in the description, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Bye for now.